Maybe it's because I'm a sucker for punishment, or maybe it's because your strong objections to my component choices. But I'm back with another holiday buyer's guide for the gamer in your life who's been really, really nice this year. Whether that's your child, brother, sister, or just yourself. FreshBooks is the super simple invoicing solution that lets you get organized, save time, and get paid faster. Click now in the video description to learn more. As usual, we'll be targeting 3 different price points in US dollars before operating system. Under $500, $900 to $1,000, and about $2,000. I'll be using pricing from Newegg US as guidance since their sorting features are excellent and their pricing is generally very similar to other sources like Amazon.com and NCIX, and I will have a link in the video description to all of the products mentioned. So let's start with Just Game, a high-quality, capable 1080p gaming box that doesn't sweat small stuff like upgradability or future-proofness. If it doesn't make the FPS number go up, it does not go in this rig. So for our CPU choice here, Intel has priced themselves completely out of the race with their least expensive quad-core, a must for some modern AAA titles, sitting at $185 US, over a third of our budget. AMD, by contrast, has a variety of budget multi-core CPU options, including the Athlon X4 860K, which is $70 for a chip with 4 steamroller cores and a heatsink in the box. It supports dual-channel RAM, but because our MSI A68HM E33V2 motherboard only has 2 RAM slots, we forewent dual-channel operation with a single 8GB stick of Kingston Value RAM here. This gives us the option to upgrade to 16 gigs of RAM in dual-channel in the future if we buy a similar stick and have a little bit of luck. For the case and power supply, I generally don't really recommend combo bundles because the power supplies included in them are frankly usually barely worth the metal that their housings are made of. But Cooler Master is somewhat of an exception here, so we went with their Elite 350 case with an included 500-watt power supply. It's nothing too sexy, but it'll get the job done, and it has the appropriate 6-pin PCI Express connector for our GTX 960 2GB graphics card. That one was a tough choice because 2 gigs is about half the frame buffer that AMD offers on competing cards like the R9 370. But at a price like this, we're likely sticking with 1080p gaming for the foreseeable future, and at the prices that NVIDIA partners like EVGA are clearing 2 gig cards to make room for the more expensive 4 gig models, I think I have to go with the 20% better raw GPU performance versus AMD's offering. For storage, I am one of, and apparently one of the only ones on the planet, but I'm one of the people who leans towards a hybrid or SSHD drive on an entry-level system. Seagate's ST1000DX001 1TB hard drive with 8 gigs of MLC SSD cache gets my choice here. Now, compared to last year's system, we saved $6, used the same case, got twice as many, albeit slower CPU cores, opted to save a bit on storage by skipping the boot SSD, but we turned that savings and our RAM savings into nearly double the graphics horsepower by reallocating that budget to the GPU. So I'm confident that in modern games, this year's model is anywhere from 70 to 80% faster than the one from last year's buyer's guide. For our next system, future expandability, features, and usability beyond gaming are much bigger considerations. It's for this reason that we decided to kick things up a notch with an Intel quad-core. Not one of those fancy Skylake ones that are so hard to get your hands on, but a last generation Haswell-based Core i5-4460. I mean, sure, you lose out on the better onboard graphics and the lower power consumption, and it doesn't have hyperthreading, but it's still a quad-core that boosts to 3.4 GHz, and we get to save a few bucks on our motherboard and RAM since we're using a last generation 16 gig kit of G.Skill Ripjaws X DDR3 on an MSI B85 G41. Note that I actually went with MSI's non-gaming branded B85 board in this price range to get something with 4 DIMM slots and dedicated ports for all audio channels, and to avoid a killer network card. My personal experience with them is that the extra features they offer are a trade-off against just plain working all the time, so I don't want to pay extra for one of those. For our power supply, we ended up with an EVGA B500 watt, a much better, not to mention 80 plus bronze unit for only $7 more than the CX430 we went with last year. Thanks EVGA for that. Our case choice, once again, didn't change much, and we went with the NZXT Source 210. It really is a great value case. There's not really much else to say about it. And the GTX 970 rears its 3.5 gigabyte head, once again coming in at $290. So about 10% cheaper than last year for the same performance. Although, it should be noted that an R9 390 is a slightly faster option at a higher price if you bat for the red team. Storage was a bit of a toss-up for me for this one. A 960 gig value SSD like an OCZ Treon 100 goes for pretty much the same price to the dollar as a 500 gig Samsung 850 EVO and a 4 terabyte Seagate hard drive. And while both are valid options, I eventually decided that because this is a desktop, it's more likely to act as a file repository for other devices in the household if you don't have a NAS, and the 1-2 solid-state mechanical punch is my best bet. A DVD writer also made it into the $1,000 machine, just in case you need one. So compared to last year's model then, we spent the same amount, almost to the dollar, and well, gaming performance actually didn't change more than probably 10 to 15% in CPU-limited titles. What we did get, though, for our money was a much faster CPU for multi-threaded workloads like light content creation, a much better power supply, and twice the solid-state storage on our boot drive, meaning that fewer games will need to be relegated to living on the hard drive. Not to mention that we also jumped from 3 terabytes of hard drive space to 4. For our last system, we are assuming that the buyer is one who cares about getting a longer life out of his or her system, is one that wants the utmost in performance and is willing to pay a bit more for it, and is potentially a computer performance enthusiast outside of gaming, whether that's content creation or some other demanding workload. So the CPU choice was a fairly obvious one. I didn't want to pay as much for a CPU as I did for our entire entry-level gaming machine, so the 5930K with its 6 processing cores and 40 PCI Express lanes was out of the question. But fortunately, this generation, the step-down 5820K, is still unlocked for easy overclocking and has the same 6 physical cores with hyperthreading technology, so the only thing missing is 12 of those PCI Express lanes, which won't matter much unless you're trying to run more than a few high-bandwidth PCIe devices, and some CPU clock speed, which our Noctua NH-U14S CPU cooler and a few minutes of tinkering in the BIOS with the help of this easy overclocking guide will easily take care of. For RAM, DDR4 is the only choice on the X99 platform, so I went with 32 gigs of Corsair Vengeance LPX quad-channel memory. At 2133 MHz, it's not setting any speed records, but since we're locking ourselves into up to 64 gigs of RAM in the future, unless we want to pull that out and replace it, I don't think we'll be running a crap ton of virtual machines on this PC in the future anyway, and that speed, especially running in quad-channel, should be enough. For the motherboard, I opted to pay the $50 ASUS tax in this case, and got the X99A USB 3.1. It lacks some of the bells and whistles of the deluxe model that we use here at the office, like high-speed AC wireless, but it's got the same overclocking capabilities, SLI and Crossfire support for multiple graphics cards, and USB 3.1 10 gigabit is a nice touch. I also like the color scheme and that it goes nicely with our Corsair RMX 750 watt power supply and Air 540 white edition case. I know it's shallow and I just spent a little more than I had to on those components, but past a certain point, case selection in particular is less about fitting the hardware inside it and more about personal taste. And if we're going to be spending this much, it doesn't hurt to have a rockin' black and white theme going to the build that, especially combined with our MSI GTX 980 Ti, is going to look absolutely sick-tastic. So on that subject then, I opted for a single graphics card this year because I realized that while my dual 970 setup last year would perform very well, likely better in many cases than a single 980 Ti where SLI scaling and the smaller video frame buffer aren't issues, it still meant occasional SLI compatibility woes, and it completely lacked a sensible upgrade path, something that I can see folks spending 2Gs on their PCs wanting. So that single more powerful graphics card provides that upgrade path and that hassle-free operation with the option to go SLI down the road if you really feel like it. Although if you see that in your future, I would recommend an 850 watt power supply versus the 750 in our base config. For storage, I really think people spending this much on a desktop should also have a NAS in their house for redundant network storage and backups, so a single 1TB class SSD should be plenty, but just in case I put together two options here: a 960 gig OCZ Vector 180 or a Samsung 850 Pro, albeit at a lower capacity, with that same Seagate 4TB drive from the last config. This machine also, by the way, gets an optical drive. So, although it could be easily remedied by going dual 970s again, our top tier config is the only one that actually gets slightly degraded gaming performance for 2015. I also stepped down the hard drive from 6TB since I believe, again, anyone keeping that much data on a single drive in their computer needs to re-evaluate his or her strategy. But the machine also got a few very significant upgrades. It'll look awesome, be nearly silent, and I doubled my solid state storage to 1TB. More than most people will need for a while. I stepped from 4 non-hyper-threaded CPU cores to 6 with hyper-threading, and I doubled my system memory. That's going to make this machine a freaking beast, capable of performing better in content creation tasks if using all of its horses, or just as well as last year's model in general tasks if its resources are being split by running VMs in the background, maybe something like this Unraid setup that we showed a little while ago, where a NAS operating system and a gaming machine running Windows are both running off of the same hardware. So that then concludes this year's Holiday PC Buyer's Guide. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and remember that these selections are not hard and fast rules. They're just guidelines. This year, for example, I didn't assume, except at the very high end, that the user would be overclocking. So your best cooling and motherboard choices might be a little different if you plan to do that. And this is really important for commodity items like RAM and video cards. My component choices are not set in stone, and my shopping methodology is pretty much as simple as sorting by lowest price and scrolling until I find a brand that I trust. So feel free to mix and match these things to get the best deals from wherever you end up buying your new system. Although on that note, if you decide to use this guide, I'd love it if you shopped using the Amazon or NCIX links in the video description. We don't get any sponsorship money from PC hardware vendors for doing these buyer's guides because that would be a huge conflict of interest, but using our affiliate links is a way that you guys can support us directly, regardless of whose parts you end up buying. Speaking of regardless of what parts you end up buying, you'll probably need a place to put them all. And Updesk has got you covered there with a wide range of powered standing desks available on updesk.com. What almost all of them have in common is the high-quality, dual-motor, electronically controlled height adjust system that lets you either manually raise or lower the desktop surface or pre-program 3 different heights for sit, stand, and okay, I actually don't know what the third one is for, but it's there, so whatevs. The one that I've been using ever since Updesk equipped our office is the large-sized Power Up, a fairly standard, gently curved on one side affair, but the benchmarking room is set up with a couple of their squared-up L-shaped corner desks to allow Luke and John to work on a couple of things at once, and they've got some other really cool options as well, like the upright that has a dry erase board for the surface on the top. So whether you're just trying to get in the habit of shifting positions periodically throughout the day, or you want to get some real health benefits out of your new desk by putting a treadmill under it, check out Updesk over at myupdesk.com, linked in the video description. So thanks for watching, guys. If you liked this video, do that thing. If you disliked it, do the other thing. And wait, if you liked it, back to liking it again, get subscribed. Maybe even consider supporting us by buying a cool shirt like this one, changing your Amazon bookmarks, one with our affiliate code. Instructions for how to do that are up there. Or even by supporting us directly through our community forum and getting a cool little badge next to your name. Now that you're done doing all that stuff, you're probably wondering, whoa, what should I watch next? Maybe you could check out our video where we... Let's see. Ah, yes, right. review the Xperia Z5 Compact from Sony, also linked up there.